Yep, John Sorensen from the Flexera team. You will find us out here. We don't have a big banner because logistics has taken care of all our equipment here. So marketing-wise, we probably have the booth that you can't find because there's no sign or anything out there. But it's right out here in front of that door. So, I'll talk about what we see as a perfect partnership for success going forward, FinOps and IT asset management, so combining the two frameworks, if you will, let's move on. So the agenda for today, I'm going to flip through some slides quickly, some statistics. We have some reports and some surveys we're doing, and I'll talk a little bit about them, and then I'm going to touch a little bit on the FinOps movement. What is it? Where is it heading? What is the purpose? And how do we see it's gaining track right now? Partnering for success with ITAM. Take action. So some practical next steps. So it's like a call to action for you guys when you get back home on Thursday. So that's the plan. And of course, question and answers. And you can find us out here if you want to discuss further. So let's quickly flip through some statistics. State of tech spend pulse, state of cloud and ITAM reports from 2022. So three surveys. Flexera is the company that publishes these, but we're not doing the surveys. It's actually a third party we're asking to run the surveys. So we get the statistics out of that, and then we publish reports or surveys or pulses or whatever we call it nowadays. So I'm going to flip through some of those statistics that I want to highlight to you, because that's what your peers in the industry, that's their response to our questions. That's what we're doing here. So let's quickly flip through them. We asked 500 approximately IT executives in the Tech Spend Pulse survey. Our third-party consultancy did that on our behalf. And that's where part of the stats are coming from, and I'll highlight when we move from one to the other in the slides there. The other two reports I'm going to make use of is State of ITAM from this year as well, and the State of the Cloud report. Flexera a few years ago acquired a company called RightScale. They already did the State of the Cloud report when we acquired the company, and we had a very good traction. So it's actually the 11th report coming out on the State of the Cloud report. Now, since we acquired RightScale, we saw there was actually a good way to take the pulse of the industry, what's going on out there. And therefore, we started doing them for other areas of our portfolio. So that was the starting point of State of ITAM, and now also take of the State of Tech Spend Pulse. So that's actually where it comes from. The vast majority, 71%, expects increase in IT budgets in the next year, and that is across the world, as you can see here. So that's coming out of the Tech Spend Pulse. So we're surveying across the world, and the idea is then to bring in those statistics, and we can see there's an increase in those expectations for the IT budgets. Good for us as a software vendor, of course, but it's also like, yeah, we do see a lot of uptick on that area right now. IT spend decentralization, right? So be aware, 80% of our respondents in this survey is part of the central IT. That also means that the stats we're getting is probably a little bit biased. We're probably a little bit positive about how much we're in control of from central IT or central procurement or whoever we're asking. So we think we're in control of 75%, right? That's our positive estimate as organizations in the IT world there. So that also means that 25% controlled by the business units. SaaS, cloud, all these kind of things. Maybe not ITAM, and maybe we're in good control because that has been there for a while, but there are other areas where we may not be in control, and it's so easy to flip that credit card. That's what this is an indicator of. Organizations turn to SaaS and move more apps and data to the cloud. That's also what you hear from other speakers already. So we see uptick on SaaS and public cloud, and you can see I've highlighted them with the arrows on that slide. That's where the money is going. And of course, COVID has influenced because of that remote workforce that we have been facilitating and needed to be facilitating during that period. So COVID has influenced this, of course. And that was also what you saw in Crayon statistics. They see this huge uplift in the SaaS spend as in one of their slides. So yeah, 69% SaaS and 59% increases on the public cloud side. So that is what we're seeing there. The visibility into spend, but also visibility into the technology area in general in this slide. So we're seeing that the visibility of spend for on-premise and SaaS and cloud, that there are some challenges there. So it's highlighted by the audience in that tech spend. We're actually not in control. We see a big risk here because we don't have the visibility of all these things going on in our organization. And then in general, we also see the same for visibility of all technology for on-prem, SaaS, and cloud, right? So it goes hand in hand. It's both the spend, but also not having the insight into what is actually running in our environment. And our environment nowadays is not the data center and our client devices anymore. It's also what is spinning up there, out there in the cloud, right? That's what we have to embrace in our portfolio going forward. The top 3 technology vendors, no surprise, Microsoft is big. Microsoft is all over the place with SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, all cloud, as well as still running in our data centers. So Microsoft is obviously big in this context. AWS, cloud only, right? So it's like one of those vendors that we now see high on the list there. Oracle, SAP, Salesforce. Salesforce, almost like pure SaaS, right? They do have a little bit through acquisitions. They also do some bits and pieces on premise, but Salesforce, a traditional SaaS company that was invented like a SaaS company. So those are the big players there. And IBM and Red Hat, with that acquisition, also up there on the list. If you look at the European, we do have European spotlights in our tech spend pulse and the surveys here. So if you want to dive in, get to our internet pages and get hold of them, and actually have links in the slides. So come and pick up the slides if you want. We see in the European statistics that there are a little bit movement on those vendors in those slides. Moving into the State of Cloud report now, so now diving in on cloud specifically. So anything cloud, what do we see there? So top cloud initiatives for 2022 across all organizations. Optimizing existing use of cloud, cost savings. That's what is buried in that sentence, right? We need to focus in on that. We need to get it under control. And by all means, we learned it the hard way at Flexera. Our engineering organization spun up a lot of things in cloud, and of course, costs just went like, as you would imagine. So we learned it the hard way at Flexera and had to drink our own, whatever you call that. So yeah, we learned it the hard way, and we have a FinOps organization now trying to get this under somewhat control internally at Flexera as well. Migrating more workloads to cloud, and this is one of the places, if you look at the European spotlight, those two are actually interchanged. So it's moving more things to cloud, and I think it's because Europe is a little bit behind Americas when it comes to moving things into cloud. But that is what expectations are for Europe alone, that moving more of our workloads into cloud instances, that is what is going to happen. And that is what our expectations are for 2022 in Europe alone. Indicators for progress, driven by cost measures, speed to market, agility. Those are the buzzwords. So that's why we invest in cloud. We need that agility for the business. The business needs to be agile. We're competitive out there in the markets we're in. And therefore, we need to be competitive and agile in our way of working in IT. And IT is a facilitator. We should never forget that. We're only there because the business needs us, right? That's the only reason we are employees of the companies. We have to facilitate the business, and that agility is what they are looking for there. And that's why we need to migrate more and more workloads to the cloud, because it gives them more opportunities business-wise. The organizational way of handling cloud and SaaS and all these things cloud now have started to create new parts of the organizations. As a cloud center of excellence, a FinOps team, it may have different labels in different organizations. The idea of the team is the same, but be aware, find that team in your own organization. It is probably there, and if it's not there, it's time to shout about it loud and clear in the organization, because somebody needs to get this under control, because otherwise finance is going to figure out, and then something is going to happen at some point in time. So make sure you find the team. It is there. If it's not there, become part of that team immediately. Or you may actually own the team. Magnus, maybe that is your next journey. So be aware. There is quite often a central team responsible, and it's your job when you get back home to figure out who that is and get involved. One of the things we also learned from the State of the Cloud report, look at those purple colors on this slide. The SAM team and the vendor management team is not involved in governing IaaS, PaaS usage costs, optimizing SaaS usage costs, governing software licenses in IaaS and PaaS. Come on, guys. This is your role, right? It's not going to disappear just because it is running in the cloud. You need to be aware. You need to figure this out. You should be involved. You should know. That visibility is key, because otherwise you cannot trust that license position you're calculating every week, or how often you're doing that, for any of the vendors. Because there may be things running in those cloud instances you're not taking into consideration. You need to get involved, and you need to work with those teams who are responsible for that, because they need to facilitate that you deploy an agent, if that is possible, or get hold of that information in other ways. So it's critical for you to get involved in this. It's critical that you gain that insight into what is running out there. And it's also about software is still running end of support, end of life, vulnerable, even though it's running in the cloud. So as a SAM team, that responsibility is not only about the license management part of that. You need to know your compliance situation, but it's also about other things in the neighborhood of SAM. Now, SAM has different meetings in different parts of the organizations. But be aware, there's a lot of things spinning up out there that you also need to take into consideration. And open source, absolutely. And if you're doing Kubernetes and stuff like that, even more then, right? Because that's what they're using in order to run those type of solutions out there. So be aware, get involved, gain that visibility, because you have the experience for having done this so many years on premise. That experience can be shared with the teams who are now trying to manage this. That experience is golden to your organization back home. So get involved. Container usage. That's one of the upticks we're seeing in the industry right now, also from our surveys here. There's a lot of containerization. So Docker, Kubernetes, all this kind of stuff running out there. And the software manufacturers are not necessarily quite clear on how you're going to license that stuff running in those type of environments. Some of them, like IBM, is quite clear in it. And ILMT is gone, because ILMT can't cover that area from IBM. But you still have it on premise for some of you. I saw your hands in the room here. We can solve that for you, but that's another discussion for another time. But be aware, containerization is there, and it's just an uptick in what we're seeing from our surveys here. This is on the rise in all of the organizations. The public cloud provider adoption rates for all organizations. For the first time in the 11 years, we've seen Microsoft with Azure being highest on that list. Until now, it was always AWS from Amazon. But this is the first year when we've seen Microsoft really doing an uptick and getting ahead of Amazon in that area. Google coming next. Europe alone, AWS has, for a few years, been behind Azure in Europe. So again, we more heavily weight towards Microsoft in that context. Google, and then the other players, Oracle, IBM, Alibaba, name it. There are many out there that you also may have to embrace. And be aware of other regions, China, some of your worldwide organizations. There may be different contracts that cover you in different areas. So that's also part of that thing. For the SAM team, this is from the ITAM report. For the SAM teams, what SAM-focused responsibilities are you going to touch on in 2022? And I've highlighted what comes low on that radar. Come on, guys. We need to get hold of this. We need to know what is there. So this has to move up that ladder, because we have to, in 2023, seeing this as high on that radar, something we need to dive into, something we need to get in control of, because that's part of our license position. It's part of SAM, it's part of ITAM, to also know what is running out there and getting it under control. So the challenges with the SAM, maturity, yes, getting hold of people that knows and stuff like that always, but dealing with new environments, SaaS, cloud, containers, we do know that is the challenge for us. But we're still quite low on that previous slide in our items we're focusing on for 2022. A little bit of a surprise to us, but that's a reason why we're speaking about it. We need to shout at you, wake you up, getting it under control. Tracking and managing spend and licensing in public cloud and containerized environments high on the agenda for the next year. So we do know, we do consider it, but now is the time to take action on it. The cloud spend continues to increase, and we do know, and our self-estimate now is growing a little bit and saying, we do think that we're not in control of a 32% of what is going on out there. Again, we are surveying most of the people we talk to are in IT. So central teams who think they are in control normally, but they still admit around 1/3 they don't know about or they're not in control of, and that happens outside of that central governance. So again, we need to be there. We need to get involved, and it's big money, as you can see on that slide up there as well, and on the top part of that slide. It is big money out there that is being left behind potentially, with 1/3 of it not necessarily being used for anything. Spinning up things is quite easy, and forgetting is a human nature. It's not necessarily bad will that we forget we have spun up something, and it's still running over the weekend and while we're on vacation and stuff like that, right? It's not bad will, but we do forget because we're humans. So get in control, get governance in place, put automation in place that will stop things that are not being part of the core business services that we're providing. And then we know very well, back to the tech spend pulse, 82% of the biggest challenges in our decision-making processes is not good enough data. And implementing them is also a big challenge. So decisions take too long to make. FinOps, what is that about? So that was like the intro of all the slides. Now, why FinOps, and why do we need to collaborate with the FinOps team? I see FinOps as a new framework. It's like another new way of talking about the need for being able to do something. It's like an iterative circle, as we've seen many times with ITIL and other frameworks in the past. So it's a similar idea. It's just a new framework. And there's a book. Go out and buy the book. It's good reading. There's a certification you can take. You can become FinOps certified. It's finops.org, where you'll find information about FinOps. So it's like a public organization that runs it. I can highly encourage you to read the book. It's good reading. It's a lot about people. It's a lot about processes, and much less about the technology. And that is important, because we as a technology provider can provide technology, but you as the people runs the processes that make use of that technology back home. So it's key that you take the practices that make sense for your organization out of learnings like the FinOps book, and then implement them back home, because technology doesn't solve it. It's the people that solves the issues at home. It's the processes you implement in order to get this under control, to make sure you are informed and you share the information across the teams that need to be aware. And leaving cloud costs with operations teams or engineering teams who doesn't focus on cost. They can't, because that's not their role, that's not their nature, that's not what they were put in place to do. They focus on performance, agility, and all these things. But we, as SAM and ITAM teams, we have the experience from having had to balance costs and compliance and all these things in the past with the technology stacks we're seeing. So we have that experience. We can share that experience with those teams that are now running the cloud environments and operates them, because that is what we're up against here. So that is the FinOps lifecycle with the inform, the optimize, and the operate. And it's like an iterative thing, because as was said very, very wisely this morning, there's an 80-20 rules always. And there's always a long tail of things you never get to. But get started with the most critical things. Follow the money, as the previous speaker just said, right? It's about finding the big chunks, getting it under control. And also one of the things we should expect with cloud costs, we probably can't make them decline, because this is about business agility. But we have to find metrics, like a unit economics, that is about finding a way of measuring that we are actually putting this under control now. We put governance in place. So we need to agree on some metrics, some KPIs, with the various teams that are involved in operating the cloud environments, so that we can share that information across those silos, because quite often we do work in silos, and we forget that we need a common vocabulary. And that's what the FinOps organization can bring in here. That is a common vocabulary, so we can talk with finance, with DevOps and operations and security, and have the same vocabulary we can use in that context. So that's the idea, to be able to measure ourselves, to benchmark ourselves, to make sure it makes sense what we're doing in the organizations when we start getting this under control. An item in the cloud, completely similar. You should take a completely similar approach. You can follow that same life cycle and get item under control at the same time. That's why you need to get involved in this, because you also need that insight. You need that visibility about what is going on out there in order to trust your compliance position that you're going to calculate on Friday when you're back home again. So partnering for success, just a reminder, we need to turn that purple color into the good blue color on the far left on that slide. We need to get involved. And I'll talk to the IT procurement and sourcing guys in the next room this afternoon and sing the same song, because they need to get involved as well, as you can see on the far right of this slide. So that's the next thing we also need to do. We need to bring all of those people, processes, and of course some technology in that can help us gain control over this situation. That's where we can bring in. But you are the people, and you need to implement the processes back home. That's the call for action on your side. We put Flexera in the middle here, but it's actually you guys that should be sitting in the middle, because you'll be driving that processes. We can help you with some technology, the Flexera One portfolio, as we call it, but put yourself in the middle. And these are all stakeholders when it comes to anything running in the cloud that you need to collaborate with. That common language, that is what the FinOps can bring to the table. So you start speaking the same language with the engineering teams, with the security team, with the finance team, the architects, the line of businesses. Again, we should not forget the line of businesses, because this is about agility. They will spin up things if we don't help them, if we don't put governance in place and collaborate with them. They'll still continue swiping the credit cards, right? So bringing together the major stakeholders, setting that common language between the parties involved, driving collaboration, all good things, all things need to happen. We've done it before. ITAM and SAM, we need to collaborate with procurement, sourcing, vendor management, whatever they're called in your organization. And we need to collaborate with the technical teams, because we need that technical information as well. So we used to facilitate that collaboration. Again, you're in a good position back home on Thursday. And don't miss the wagon. Challenges, yes, there's always going to be challenges. Again, find the big rocks first and do something about them. That is the only way to get this. It's an iterative process, right? You'll learn while doing, and the entire team around you will learn while doing. So it's key to put a process in place, a governance in place. Licensing, complicated, yes, always complicated. It's just going to grow more complicated as we move things to cloud. And you all have things running in the cloud. Even if I asked the question and some of you said, we don't, I'm pretty sure somebody has spun something up in the cloud, even if you don't know about it. It is there. So getting hold of that bird's nest in the middle and start making sense out of it, and then sharing it across all of the teams that have an interest and have a need for knowing, and also needs to be able to make decisions. Because this is the foundation for making decisions for all of them. Bringing all of those bits and pieces together to make the right decisions. Speak the same languages with each other. So the practical next steps are identify the current state. Find that Cloud Center of Excellence or the FinOps team or whatever it's called. Establish your license contractual positions. And from a lot of the enterprise agreements, there is cloud involved. Microsoft has for many years put big carrots in front of us to go into Azure. Right? So it's part of your agreement already with some of those vendors out there. So make sure you understand. Make sure you understand if you can take existing licenses running on-premise into cloud and all these things. Magnus, you talked about the same thing. It's not a given thing. You have to make sure you understand your agreements before you start making decisions. And everyone needs to make decisions every day. Again, building that foundation is key. Tooling and gap analysis, yes, we can help with some tooling if you have gaps, but find the gaps. Find the gaps you have in order to facilitate those discussions back home. And then it's time to look at what can the tool vendors then provide. What can we bring to the table as the tool vendor? But don't forget it's about the people and the processes. That is key. Risk-based plan, quick wins. I'm sure I'm just singing the song you've been utilizing for many years in your world back home as ITAM and SAM practitioners. You know the drill. You've done it many, many times before. It's just a new thing we need to embrace as well and need to influence, at least. That's the least thing we should do. That is influence. A lot of slides, a lot of information. I'm throwing at you, and I'm now between you and a break, I know, but any questions? It was a wake-up call, I know.
Jeannie from Rice. Why should my company choose Flexera instead of Snow and CSM?
Oh,
yes.
I don't want to go into that kind of discussion up here. I think that my idea here is basically to say, you need to understand your current state. Go back home and figure out your current state. Find out where you have gaps. And then it's time to look into what can the different vendors provide in that context. And in some cases, one may be better than the other, but I'm not gonna say we will always be the best, because we will not. We will focus on certain things on our side that we believe, and that's based on the stats I started with here. Where do we see the industry going? Where do we see our customers moving? And what is their needs that we don't fulfill today? But that's part of our roadmap then to bring those bits and pieces to the table that we can't facilitate necessarily today with our tooling. But the other guys will be doing similar things with their customers and their surveys. So I'm not gonna say one or the other. That's on you to make that decision at home. Fons.
Thanks, John. Fons with Softline. A question that we see frequently with customers is they have issues in detecting unmanaged spend. And the 31% is usually a big part of that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give the audience here to basically get a grip on that?
Yeah, the advice is, first of all, you need to know. You need to see that spend. Who is spending, and where does the spend go? So you need discovery. I think that somebody early on in the morning said we need discovery, and there are new discovery sources needed if we're going to look at credit card transactions, right? It's not something we're going to find by plowing through technical stuff. is something we'll find by pulling in information maybe from your expense claim system, right? That's where we can find that kind of spend from. But it's something, again, a little bit political, maybe in certain organizations, because of course we are exposing immediately data about what do people actually do with their credit cards, and then they expense it. And we won't see everything, because it's only if they expense it we'll see it, right? So, but we can start digging into the 30% and where is it going. And I've seen many funny things going on there with credit cards when we're doing POCs and stuff like that. Like, even though we have big agreements with Microsoft, you still see credit card transactions for Microsoft or Office 365 or something like that. Interesting, right? Why do people do that? Well, maybe they don't know, or maybe, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But we see funny things going on there. And this is again, pulling that information in makes it visible. And then you start deciding on what do you want to do about it. Because you may turn the blind eye to it. For certain things, it may make sense to put the blind eye to it if it's like, again, 80-20 rules. Don't boil the ocean to get hold of the last 20%. But focus on the big chunks of money, also when it's credit card transactions, again. And it's easy to find because it's money, right? It's expense claims. So we know that what the value of that is immediately. But that's a good source of information in the context of unsanctioned spend, as we call it. Shadow SaaS or shadow IT, basically. That's what it is.
Do we have any final questions for John? Okay, then we thank you, John, for a great presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your time.